a trade deal with India, the EU, the US, it doesn't necessarily translate to how people are feeling on the doorstep, right?
I feel, oh, look, just shut up. It's bloody hard to be leader of the country in this difficult circumstance with Trump going on.
Do you do that for every decision you take in your life?
Well, no, but
Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction with me, Beth Rigby.
And me, Harriet Harman.
And there's a big gap there because Ruth is sadly not here. She's been last seen chasing her phone around in a black cab in London. She can't make it today. It's also actually a miracle that I'm here as well. And those of you watching on YouTube will be like, why is Beth wearing her glasses? Apparently, my producer says I look very trendy, so you need to get on and you can all have a vote on are Beth's glasses cool or not. But I've scratched my cornea and I spent quite a chunk of yesterday on Wednesday in Moorfields Eye Hospital instead of covering Prime Minister's questions. And if any of you out there have ever done this, you will know how incredibly painful it is. So I am feeling incredibly sorry for myself. It's a miracle I'm here. Harriet, you've also done it. So Harriet has loved-bombed me with kind sympathy this morning.
I've been on that same journey. It's unbelievable. It's a whole body experience to have your cornea scratched.
I have to say, I was meant to do PMQs and I was in the office and I was like, this is really bad. I need to leave the office. And I jumped in a cab and I was going home and I was like, this is really bad. Maybe I haven't just got something in my eye. And then I stopped off at Moorfields Eye Hospital and my goodness, I'm glad I did.
But even though you didn't manage to be there for PMQs, you wouldn't miss the pod.
But also, it's a miracle, or it's brilliant that Harriet's also here because Harriet, you also having dental surgery this afternoon, huh?
Oh my God, don't even mention it. Terrified is not the thing. But it's such a big week this week. We've had to be here.
And a bit later on, we'll have a third wheel. We're going to be joined by former Tory advisor Salma Shah. Look, we're recording this on Thursday and I woke up this morning and we're going to get into this, Harriet, aren't we? Trump overnight announced that he's going to make a very big announcement on a very major deal with a very major country.
He said it's going to be a trade deal with a big, well-respected country. And I thought, can he be talking about us?
Yeah, and he was talking about us. So we're going to get into that. That's a big moment. Anyway, look, I can't believe it's less than 2 weeks until we're back on stage together with Armando Iannucci for our live show. Time really does fly when you're touring regional hotel rooms and Moorfields Eye Hospital as well. I mean, what a way to live, eh?
Anyway, we're down to our last few tickets. So if you've got a free evening on the 20th of May and you fancy a night out with us, all the details are plastered all over our socials, or you can just go to aegpresents.co.uk.
OK, but Harriet, we've got to get on with it, haven't we? Because we've got a lot to get through. And look, it's trade deal moment. That is massive. And then also, Harriet, the stuff that you talked about last week about MPs feeling nervous after those local election results, and they have all come back to Westminster this week, and the mood is, I think, fair to say, sulphurous. And there's a few WhatsApps that have popped up on my phone about gauging the mood, but we're going to talk about the Prime Minister's troubles at home, what's happening with Labour, does the government need to think the winter fuel tax? Harriet, should we start off with Trump and trade? Look, in true Trump style, this all started overnight with a social media post saying he's going to do a deal with a mystery country, as you were saying, Harriet, and that mystery country is us. And it's a pretty major moment for the UK government. Like, first things first, is this a massive win for Starmer?
I think it is, and it's been a very big week because we've not only got the heads of agreement of the US-UK trade deal, but we've also had the India trade deal, which is very important indeed. So they're not free trade agreements. They are a deal which involves negotiation and compromise on both sides. And, you know, the important thing is that Keir Starmer feels that we've got a good enough deal, both in relation to India, UK, and in relation to the US, UK, that we we are going to get a lot out of it. But the other thing to remember is that it's not Europe. This is not, the Brexit bonus. This is still trying to catch up with what we've lost out from leaving Europe, and the negotiations with Europe, which are ahead of us in a few days' time. Those are going to be very important indeed.
You might think that you might carefully stage this stuff out, but you never know when the Trump bomb will drop and he will just, announce something on social media that then throws everything to disarray.
So he's definitely controlling. Trump is definitely controlling the timing on this.
Yes.
Otherwise, I don't think Keir Starmer would have chosen VE Day to make the announcement.
No, he wouldn't have chosen VE Day. He has a series of events today.
Can I just say something about VE Day? Because when I was first in Parliament 40 plus years ago, many of the men there had fought in the war. They were of that generation. And being with people like Dennis Healey or Edward Heath, you could tell there was such an experience that they had. They were an extraordinary generation. And thinking about my parents who were in the war, and typically in those days, they just didn't talk about the war to people like my generation. But we found my mum's old cookbooks, which included things like carrot marmalade and eggless scones. They had real privations. Yeah. And my dad fought in North Africa, and my mum raised money for the Free French and was part of the Workers' Educational Association. And it's that generation which is passing on what they faced. It's quite a sombre moment to think about that, especially when we think about what's facing us now in Eastern Europe. And it's made us remember how important our relationship with America was and reflect on that now when it seems to be changing.
OK, well, look, this is what I had from a Number 10 spokesperson this morning. It's the PM will always act in Britain's national interest for workers, businesses, for families. The US is an indispensable ally for both our economic and national security. Talks on a deal between our countries been continuing at pace. Look, between the lines, what's the mood music in Whitehall? Well, what I have gleaned is that people are really genuinely pleased about it. I think that they will frame it at Number 10 and across Whitehall as this massive moment which shows that Starmer's approach of the cool, calm head and not trying to agitate against Trump and do it all behind closed doors and be pragmatic and be unemotional, that it's begun to pay off. But I would also say that I think there's a view as well that for the US, Trump also needs a ramp to go back, to climb down. He needs a ladder to climb down because he announced Liberation Day. He announced all these tariffs. The markets reacted how they reacted. And he needs an off-ramp to say, well, I've threatened all this and now I'm going to get a series of deals. And actually, for the UK, the UK-US relationship, the UK is one of the first deals. It's a good moment for the US as well. So I think what we're going to see is a narrow, quick deal. Now, whether that is then built into a bigger, more comprehensive deal that the Conservative Party were envisioning when they were in power, I think that that's another discussion we will have, Harriet. But the idea that this is going to be some comprehensive, substantial deal, I don't think it is. I think what we'll see is movement on car tariffs. Do you remember the 25% tariffs? On steel tariffs? So can they drive that down? On agriculture, there might be a little bit at the margins, but I think the government have clearly said we're not going to compromise on food standards. And watch for the digital service tax, because there's been lots of speculation, hasn't there, Harriet, that the government would lower the digital services taxes for big tech. My sense is that they actually won't do that, that actually they've decided that they're not going to do that. And that for you, Harriet, is quite a big deal, because I remember you saying on the pod the other day you really didn't want them to do that. So that would be welcome for you if they don't actually lowered the digital services tax, right?
Absolutely. And I really hope they don't do that, because the reason why we put in the digital services tax is because a lot of these multinational companies based in America don't pay corporation tax because they structure themselves so as not to pay corporation tax, but they get a great deal of profit out of the UK. But if you think about it, we can all remember just a short while ago, all those pictures on television of the Jaguar Land Rovers all lined up because they weren't being exported to the States. And although they didn't make redundant their main employees, all the contracted employees all around Solihull and the West Midlands were all laid off straight away. And now this week, we've got trade deals which we hope will be cars going to the States again, but also will be Jaguar Land Rover going to India. And Modi actually mentioned the importance of them getting access to Jaguar Land Rover. So I think it's the immediate jobs, but it's also investment for the future. So I think he'll feel well pleased with himself, but he's got to make sure people in Runcorn feel pleased with it as well.
Optically, it plays into the whole Starmer strategy of, being the Trump whisperer, not agitating, trying to stay close to Trump, not getting diverted from what he wanted to achieve, which was to lower these tariffs and because of the impact it could have on the UK economy. You've then got the India deal this week. That has been controversial, contested a bit. But then also, the week after next, we're going to have this big EU summit here in fact, I think it's the 19th. It's the day before our live show. I'm going to be packing it in that week, Harriet. There's a massive EU summit here where the UK will want to do some sort of improvement on trading relations also with the European Union. And, a trade deal with India, the EU, the US, as you said, it doesn't necessarily translate to how people are feeling on the doorstep.
But I think Keir Starmer has been really instrumental in this. It's telling that although there was 3 years of negotiations started under Boris Johnson with India, they didn't actually land the trade deal. And that has landed now, which is massively beneficial to this country as well as to India. So that is a real plus that he managed to get that over the line.
If you put your political hat on, which you actually wear all the time anyway, really, but if you are Keir Starmer, how do you translate US trade deal, Europe deal, India deal? How do you translate that back to the people in Runcorn? Do you do it through everyday economics? Like, you will be better off, your wages will go up, we will create... I mean, how does he translate things he's doing into winning people back at the ballot box? Because that's the big challenge, isn't it?
It's about jobs and it's about investment. It's about showing people that it's their jobs for themselves, investment for the future, which will be their kids' jobs. He's got to have that kind of supply line down into different towns and cities around this country and through all the different generations. He's got to make that link. So the politics, he's got to keep working on that. He can't be just breathing a sigh of relief and think, job done.
Yeah, it's so fun. It is so interesting, though, because it just shows in a way, not how Trump has the whip hand. I think that's that's defenestrating of the UK government.
He's mercurial, though. He's unpredictable and mercurial, and therefore you've got to err on the side of caution. There's no point saying something out of line and then suddenly he'll whip the trade deal out from under your nose.
Exactly.
It must be like treading on eggshells.
I think it's not just treading on eggshells. I think it's sort of treading on like a battery farm of like eggshells. It's like, it's so... there's so much jeopardy all the time. So Number 10 will be really anxious that if they let anything leak or if they say anything or if anyone gets wind here and then does Trump
they've managed
take
not to.
offence. No, I know, but can you imagine having to operate like that? He's kept us on our toes again. One thing I did want to ask you though, Harriet, on the India trade deal this week, like I remember going to India with Boris Johnson when he was hoping to announce this deal. But I remember coming to India and he was on a visit and like the streets, you'd have hated it, Harriet. The streets were just paved with people waving at Boris Johnson. There were Boris Johnson giant posters everywhere for miles from the station. I mean, I imagine Boris Johnson really enjoyed it. There was just Boris everywhere. And he talked up this trade deal and the government, then Rishi Sunak was trying to do it and then it actually lands and it's a Labour government have secured this deal. But it wasn't without controversy, was it? Because there's all this issue about having what's been agreed is that if Indian workers come over here on short-term visas to work for Indian employers, they don't have to pay national insurance. Those employers don't pay national insurance on those temporary workers, and neither do those temporary workers get calculated into immigration statistics because obviously they're temporary, so they go back again. Now, this is a sort of system that actually the UK government do with other countries when you're doing trade deals, so it's not particularly unusual. But it did kind of create a bit of a backlash, didn't it? At a moment when the government are increasing national insurance contributions for UK employers, that they do a trade deal with India, and there's exemptions, and they got a bit of stick for that.
This was an issue which apparently scuppered the deal in terms of the Tories, because Rishi Sunak wanted to do this deal and Kemi Badenoch vetoed it on that basis. Now, what the Indians were apparently saying is, well, if we can't have this reciprocal national insurance arrangement, can we at least have more visas to facilitate it? And of course, that was a no-go. So this government have managed to do this deal on the basis of the normal reciprocal arrangements for national insurance, but without increasing the number of visas. Yeah. But there was some unfortunate briefing as well, which was that apparently Yvette Cooper didn't know about this and wasn't in favour of it. I mean, it turns out, I understand, that she did know about it and was in favour of it because it doesn't change the immigration statistics, but is massively helpful economically. But I think they should have shut that down quicker. And
that's interesting.
I think that the worry is that people will get the idea that this trade deal means Indian people who are already here can apply for jobs with UK companies and undercut UK workers because they're cheaper to employ, because the employer doesn't have to pay national insurance. And that is not actually the situation.
I mean, also just in terms of what the economic growth will be, I think it was something like add 4.8 billion on government estimations to the economy by 2040. That's a kind of 0.1% benefit to GDP. So some people would say it's quite a lot of political noise, as you're saying, and a bit of a battle in terms of communicating this for how much upside. I think in the round, the government will be like, we'll take some of the attack lines because we can frame this in a different way. But as you said, they've got to be really sharp on this and maybe more aggressive in just shutting things down if they don't think it's correct.
I think so. I don't think they'll want to take the attacks at all because immigration is such a sensitive political issue. So they will want to close that down. But that is the comms battle that they'll be engaged in.
OK, well, look, let's take a quick break. And we're going to be obviously talking a lot more about trade deals in the next couple of weeks. Hello, we are back from the break and we've got Salma Shah here. And I'm very happy about this because Salma Shah and I have known each other for a long time because back in the coalition years into the Sajid Javid as business secretary, health secretary, what else? The local government secretary, home secretary. Salma was his right-hand woman. So Salma and I have known each other for a long time. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. And I feel at home already because I'm looking round at Harriet Harman's suit and realising that I've got the exact same one and nearly wore it today. So it feels like this is a good space to be.
That's obviously you're in your zeitgeist.
I'm just so glad you're not wearing it because, of course, you'd have been looking 100 million times better than me on it. And as it is, your charisma is going to be 100 million times better than me as well. So we don't want you wearing a suit looking better as well.
I wish you had worn the same suit. It would have been great. We could have clipped that up and just played that out everywhere, all day, every day. In fact, but it means that you two are aligned in some way, even though you are on different sides of the political
foes.
Barriers.
We both still love an M&S machine washable.
You were just listening in, weren't you, we were talking about the trade deals. And obviously you were in government for many years and worked in the business department when various trade deals were being discussed. So what's your big take on the India-US moment? I mean, can Starmer clock it up for a win? Do you think the Tories are secretly green with envy?
Well, I think you've got to treat them both separately, as you would with any trade deal. They're on their individual merits. The India trade deal, I think, is a win for the government. It's obviously been years in the making, and there are various people who've been part of it, including, previous Tory administrations. Yeah. And so, it's important that we got something like this over the line because that was always what we were trying to seek when we exited the European Union. So I think it's a little bit odd for us to be now criticising the Indian deal on the national insurance payments, because actually this is a very good deal. What is the alternative to these negotiations? It could have been more visas. It could have been more lenient terms for immigrants coming in from India. And I think that would have been less politically acceptable. So it's not necessarily what's in front of you, even though this is politics and you have to find your dividing lines and your attack lines. It's actually what was the alternative. So as it goes, this is a good deal with a country that has geopolitical significance for us when you think about a rising China, and a country that could potentially in 50 years be the world's largest economy. So this is government doing what it should do with international relations, which is protecting ourselves for decades, not just one parliamentary term.
Just on this about Kemi Badenoch and how she reacts to this, because obviously she was the business secretary under Rishi Sunak trying to sort out the India trade deal. This is from a Labour figure. They said to me, that was a bizarre Prime Minister's questions, because this is when Kemi Badenoch didn't raise the India deal, even though she has on the sidelines been criticising it.
This is the thing about politics. You've got to pick your battles. But you can't then, on one hand, not raise it in the chamber, which is your kind of like one moment, and then have these little skirmishes on the side. I suspect because Reform has decided that they're going to have a go about this deal and their national insurance payments. So you don't want to be in this position where you're constantly chasing Reform's tail. If she didn't like that, then fair enough. There is more, I think, for her on the US trade deal than there really is on the India trade deal.
Okay.
And the issue with the US trade deal is how much of this is a boon for us or President Trump's off-ramp because of his move on tariffs that has really spooked the markets, has really caused a lot of chaos, a chaos that is compounded by more conflict in the world. India, Pakistan is not something that was baked into the market. So we're in this kind of really chaotic place. And actually, what are we going to get out of this trade deal? It's not going to be detailed. So that is a place that where the Prime Minister would have been weaker. So if she wanted to go on trade, if she wanted to go on the future, why not do that rather than nothing at all, or sort of cow a little bit because you're not quite sure where the rest of the right is going on the India trade deal. So this is where dividing lines, choosing your battles really, really matters.
But also, I think sometimes there's a role for the leader of the opposition to basically say to the government, you've done something which is in the national interest. I, as leader of the opposition, I too am concerned about the national interest, so I'm going to back you on this. And I think Kemi Badenoch needs to be taken seriously, and she should have surprised everybody by getting up and saying, I did a lot of work to build towards this. And actually, I want those jobs. I want that investment in the future. And if you're doing something which is even halfway right, we will back you in the national interest. But she just couldn't do that. And I think she's missing a trick there because she looks like flaky, politically opportunistic. And, when those jobs come and when that investment comes, she'll look as though she was opposed to it for opportunistic reasons.
It's also a shame because she could have afforded to be magnanimous on this. I mean, magnanimity, it's not, she doesn't have to be magnanimous. It's not like something she's been wronged in some way. But you're right to say, to claim it, to say we got you most of the way there, actually. You can't just sort of say, wow, aren't I amazing? I got this trade deal with India. Actually, it's years in the making. Yeah. And wasn't that a better political tactic than...
I think it comes back to what you said, Salma, though, when you start talking about the kind of chasing the Reform long tail as well. The problem is for Kemi Badenoch, she's fighting on these two fronts. Like, who is her opposition? Is it the government and the Labour Party, or is it Reform? And the problem she's got is it's not just those two, it's Lib Dems as well. And she is just squeezed every which way, right? Yeah. And in the end, you've got to take a decision, but she's trying to she's worried about the Reform threat on the deal, so she doesn't want to kind of allow them to get a run in on that, and she's missed out on it. Who'd want to be the leader of the opposition at the moment?
Well, that's true, but I mean, the reality is with most politicians, sometimes they're trying to be too clever by half. And actually, sometimes the simplest answer is the best one, and it's as Mrs. Thatcher always used to say when she was in government, let's start with the facts.
Just basically, I mean, it seems to, I don't disagree with either of you that the smart thing would have been to just try and claim some of the success, because she did do a load of hard yards in those trade deals, and the, it is the kind of the first big post-Brexit trade deal. But look, let's move on. Let's get back to Keir Starmer and the woes he's having, because, yeah, he's got some trade deals, but goodness me, he's got some problems as well. Thanks for all the messages, firstly, that you sent after last week's podcast and the local elections. We had great engagement. Loads of you tuned in, loads of you sent messages. We really love it. But first, I want to turn to something that you predicted last week, Harriet, because you said that the backbenchers were getting really shaky, and you were kind of a bit like, well, what do you expect? You know, it's going to be a tough period in government, and just, you know, we've still got an election a long way out. Like, let's just get on with the job. But you said that you hoped they might kind of calm down by the time they got back. They did not calm down, did they? Winter fuel allowance, massive backlash on that, and it is building. Welfare cuts, big backlash on that too. MPs are feeling really, really nervous. The Welsh First Minister, Eleanor Morgan, criticising cuts in a big speech this week. The Red Wall MPs made a statement on Tuesday night. The PM's shown strong leadership internationally, which must now be matched at home. I mean, goodness me. It has been rough. Look, we had one of those Red Wall MPs, Jo White. She leads the Red Wall caucus. She's the MP for Bassetlaw. And this is what she told us. She sent us in a voice note. Let's have a listen to Jo.
My name is Jo White. I'm the Member of Parliament for Bassetlaw, but I'm also the convener of the Red Wall group of Labour MPs. I accept that we've come into government during very, very difficult times. The finances aren't there. There's a big financial hole, but we're not moving fast enough. People were expecting change in a big, big way. And I think the tolerance for us died at the point of a few days into winning the election. We made the big announcement on winter fuel payments. And so our connection with our core vote just died with it. And I fundamentally believe we're the party of the working class, and that relationship is dying. If you look at how people vote across the country, that vote for Labour is strong in the metropolitan areas, but it's weak in areas like ours. In my view, we need to reset the government, and the biggest way to do that is by tackling issues such as winter fuel payments. I think we should raise the threshold so that people perhaps who are paying a higher level of tax are the only people who are exempt from getting it. We should tackle issues on immigration. That's one of the biggest issues in my area. Our comms have been absolutely appalling. At the moment, if you look at the big announcements that Rachel Reeves has made, I define it as the low-hanging fruit. She's made big announcements about Luton Airport, about the third runway, and about the better rail connectivity between Oxford, Milton Keynes and Cambridge. And whilst those are welcomed, they'll make no difference to the communities in the Red Wall areas. And so we've been looking at them and saying, hey, what about us? And we don't want to be waving from the sidelines. And what happens is that the Treasury relies on something called the Green Book to do all the calculations and how they can justify government spend. And in my view, they have to rip that up. And they have to work with perhaps local mayors and focus on the areas where we need better connectivity. We need to encourage better partnership with big business. And we need to invest in skills and training so that people in my area can get good jobs. At the moment, they have to leave the area, my area, and if they want to get a good, well-paid job or a better paid job. Sir Keir Starmer, our number one ask of you is to come and meet the Red Wall Group. Come and hear our anger and our frustration for yourself.
So that was Jo White. She's the leader of the Red Wall caucus. She did not pull her punches there, did she? I mean, pretty critical of the government. And just to add a bit more colour and flavour to that, because that was on record, this is from one of the Red Wall MPs that I've been in touch with. They sent me that this week as well. I said, how's the mood What's the vibe? This is what I got. Mood is verging on genuine fury. Sense that we can forgive mistakes but not doubling down on them. Personal independent payment vote, that's the vote on some of the welfare reforms, is likely to be a moment where anger will spill over if the government, don't shift. Real feeling of aloofness from leadership into backbenchers, but the problem is that the natural reaction to not being listened to is to say it louder.
Labour got a drubbing in the council election, and we could all see the opinion polls leading up to that election. We all knew the difficulties with the economy and the context of it. We also knew, because Labour MPs are knocking on doors in marginal seats, they knew that their voters were, very frustrated with the Labour government. So I thought they would be expecting the drubbing they got. And I was surprised because they've been very resilient through the winter fuel allowance, and they've been sort of tough and loyal and, we've got a long time and it's tough times, but we're up for it. That they suddenly seems to have had a real wobbly moment. And I think that when it comes to Jo White, who I'm delighted was elected for Bassetlaw, and I'm sure is a really, hardworking MP for that community, I can just imagine what Keir Starmer is thinking listening to that voice note or reading her statement.
She put out a statement from the group, and so this is why it's not just Jo sounding off. It's actually she's convened she runs a group and they're all kind of endorsing a critical statement. Sorry. Keir Starmer listening to Electoral Dysfunction as he does his morning walk on a Saturday morning. He thinks, Harriet, take it away.
He will be thinking, has it not occurred to Jo that actually she wouldn't have won her seat in Bassetlaw had I not been leader of the Labour Party? I led this party out of opposition, regained seats that we had lost before that were Tory seats. And now she's telling me how to do my job. I should think there is steam coming out of his ears. And I feel very much in two minds about this debate issue within the party. Because on the one hand, I feel, oh, look, just shut up. It's bloody hard to be leader of the country in this difficult circumstance with Trump going on and terrible things going on in Ukraine and the economy is stuffed. Just give him a bit of a break and just back him up. On the one hand, I think just shut up and get on with it. But on the other hand, I think perhaps it is right to show the country that there is a breadth of view within the Labour Party and that there are different areas which are being represented. But we don't want to tip over into factionalism, and we don't want to be undermining the Prime Minister. There's something about the tone of that Red Wall statement, which is a bit like, Keir Starmer, you need us to tell you how to do it. And I just think that's not a very welcome tone. She mentions the winter fuel allowance. There's been a lot of discussion because clearly it was raised all the time in every doorstep. And it's very much a big issue in Scotland, where there's elections next year, and in Wales, where there's elections next year. So the question is, what is the government going to do in the winter fuel allowance? Are they going to adjust it? Are they going to make it universal, not means tested? Or are they going to tough it out? And I've done a little chart of all the issues which are against the change.
Always well prepared.
I can see it.
Can you see the chart?
There's a diagram there.
All the issues which are pro-change on it. I think they'll probably come out not changing it on the basis that the damage has already been done. To remedy it might not make the difference and might cause further problems. But it does mean they need to do something else. For example, it puts more pressure on them delivering on the child poverty strategy. And we're expecting to have that next month. So it might be, we've really annoyed pensioners, but a lot of them have got grandchildren. Everybody cares about child poverty. So it puts more pressure on going forward.
Okay. I've got a question for you now, because you've pricked my little Bethy ears there. The child poverty strategy, the big ask from the Labour benches has been about lifting the 2-child cap on family allowance, right?
I think that it will be interesting if the Red Wall people, Jo White, are you listening here? Are you going to be pressing for the lifting of the 2-child benefit cap? If they get together with the Labour women MPs, of which there are hundreds, it could be that they have a kind of progressive win, and it might not be a bad thing to do in the context of an overall strategy on child poverty. So let's see whether, instead of just protesting and annoying Keir Starmer, they can build a bridge to a new progressive set of policies. So, it is difficult, and none of these things are easy. And, after all, Rachel Reeves has got her work cut out. The economy has not been righted by the arrival of a Labour government. It is work in progress. But let's just see.
Do you think we need to bookmark that moment, Salma?
Oh,
Harriet
100%.
Harman, let's just see.
I'm making mental files of what Harriet's saying right now.
This is my life. Every week it's a joy. Can you see? I'm like, ooh, it's interesting.
Even I'm like, oh, yes, tell me more. What I think is really fascinating about this is that, generally speaking, it's marvellous being former and being on the outside, because you don't have the same pressure and tension that you used to, because I have the same reaction. It's like when you're in government and people start criticising you from the outside.
You were rolling your eyes when that voice note was...
Yeah, because
it triggered something deep within you.
Really deep, because it's just like, even like backbench MPs who are griping from the sidelines, you just think, okay, well, come and have a conversation with me and I'll tell you what the thing is and we can work it out, instead of kind of like going public with it. But there is a problem here, and it's a party management problem. And what Jo seemed to be saying is things that she's sort of seeing out in the ether, but not things that she is having direct conversations about. And I think party management is about doing that outreach to, the convener of the Red Wall MPs, or, certain MPs that they know have an impact. And maybe that's done through the whip's office. But, Starmer really needs to get a grip of the party management side of it as well, because these problems won't go away. I've had plenty of experience of that, where you've had actually weak whips offices and weak whipping operations, because it's not just about forcing people into the lobbies to vote for what you need. There's a pastoral care element of it, and there's a listening exercise that you have to do in order to keep the party together. So that's point one. Point two, I totally agree. You can't, having taken the pain on winter fuel, you can't go back on it. It was not a smart decision at the beginning. The Chancellor is obviously looking for savings wherever she can and efficiencies wherever she can. So it seemed like an easy thing to do. Politically, not very smart. Also not very smart of the Conservatives not to kind of like gain something from that in the local election campaigns, or to campaign on it effectively. But the point that you make around what do you then balance it out with? What's the negotiation? That's where you need to get smart, because there's obviously been a real sort of concerted, choreographed effort from certain elements of the Labour Party to say winter fuel came up, you need to think about it. Nobody voted for a Labour government to cut welfare. And that is something that you get consistently. So there is organisation behind this. The thing that is lacking behind that organisation is, what is the ask? It can't just be to reverse something. Work out where the balance is, work out with Rachel Reeves where you can actually find the accommodation. And that really is the stress and the skill of politics.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, Harriet, when Salma was talking about a party management, you were nodding about party management.
Yeah, I think that Number 10 need to get them in, but I think that they need to get both sides of the argument in, because you could get the Red Wall in and they're, complaining about the winter fuel allowance, and then you've got another set of people in the Parliamentary Labour Party who've got very different views, and somehow it's got to bring that family together and focus always on what is the future.
Yes.
But it's very difficult because, there's a lot of bandwidth taken up when you've got, Putin's invasion of of Ukraine. You've got God knows what's going on in America every second of the day. You're negotiating a trade deal. You're trying to sort out the public services. And that's why it's very difficult to set aside the time and space to people who are making you roll your eyes with irritation, because you're thinking, hey, this is a team, guys. You signed on the dotted line to be a Labour candidate to support a Labour government.
Yeah, but Harriet,
why can't you just be a bit teamly?
But that's life.
Exactly, but that's why they've got to get over that frustration.
But you don't even have that in families, I could go into a room with my siblings. We're a team. We share the same blood and we've got loads of differences, or your kids or whatever.
But they've got to get over over that frustration and actually be nice to them, be inclusive of them, despite the fact they've got the big government job to do.
But the management requires you to have the right talent. And this is why it always comes back to who is around the cabinet table with you and who are you entrusting it. Who are you trusting to get these things done? I mean, you were incredibly lucky in that you had served under Tony Blair and you had a pretty, I'll say this, I've got no compunction in saying it, you had a pretty stellar team, you know, when the Labour cabinet came in 97, really talented, really high quality team. And I think that politics has really sort of diminished itself by people being afraid of making the arguments, by people, even internally, by people like prime ministers trusting cabinet ministers to get on with it and to work things out between them so that it doesn't all sit with one person at the top in number 10.
But there's an issue
and also
here.
The rise of the advisor, I would say that I think that has been a very bad thing in politics, the rise of the advisor.
The issue here is about the relationship between ministers, the front bench and the back benches. And in the olden days, what used to happen...
our days.
No, but it's quite germane to what's happening now.
I love the olden days, saying. I say this all the time.
Yeah, me too.
In the olden days.
So in the olden days, before Ed Miliband was leader of the party, the shadow cabinet, the Labour shadow cabinet, was elected by Labour MPs. And if you were a backbencher, you couldn't move in the tea room or in the division lobbies from front benchers coming up and being nice to you and asking what's going on in your constituency and being interested in your ideas, because you needed their votes to get elected into the shadow cabinet, which would then put you in the cabinet when we got into government. So what there was baked in is a real relationship between the aspiring ministers and the ministers and the backbench MPs. But once we abolished the elections to the shadow cabinet and it became just appointed by the leader, all the front bench's attention turned away from the backbenchers because they were completely irrelevant. And they shone their light only on the leader. And so what you see is that the backbenchers have got no relationship or no muscle that connects them to the front bench. Now, some ministers understand this, and you see them hanging around in Portcullis House and they're always chatting around. Others, they're just nowhere to be seen. And somehow they have got to rebuild that relationship, which was undermined by the abolition of shadow cabinet elections.
But one of the biggest pieces of power a prime minister has is patronage, right? You know, prime ministers have power because they get to select the cabinet, right? You know,
absolutely.
That gives them real power.
But it's not enough because everybody knows that not everybody is going to be on the front bench. Having said that, most MPs do feel they're going to be on the front bench, however unlikely it seems, because their mother thinks they're going to be on the front bench. In fact, their mother thinks they're going to be prime minister. So, you know, everybody's got aspirations, unlikely as it might seem.
Look, I just want to come back because I did actually get a bit of a readout from government about where they are on winter fuel allowance. And it was interesting, Sam, when you said, like, you're going to have to find an accommodation. Because one thing governments, we all know, part of the problem for a government is if you start being pressurised by your backbenchers and then you cave, it can be seen as weakness. So often governments will double down.
Yeah, that's on my list of against change there.
It's literally top of the list.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that because I read Harriet's list. I knew that all by myself.
But can I just say though, we should like put this out on our socials.
Well, I don't know. That's the secret notebook of power.
I can take a picture.
But just in terms of the winter fuel allowance, I did check in with some government sources about this, and what I was told was, and I've written this in shorthand, so this might take a while for me to decode. That there is no change. And the reason I was interested is The Guardian did a piece on it, and The Guardian are normally on the money in the sense that sometimes if the government wants to pitch roll, we've talked in this podcast about pitch roll and stuff.
They go to The Guardian.
They go to The Guardian. And The Guardian did a story about they're going to look again at winter fuel allowance. And I thought, oh, well, they must be looking, because I would trust that. But that...
it was on the front page of The Guardian, and they said they were going to potentially look at changing the threshold.
But I've been given a very firm pushback on this. This is what someone told me. They said that they would point out that you don't want people like Richard Branson getting the winter fuel allowance, i.e. he's obviously the like totem now for rich pensioners. I mean, he's a billionaire. Sorry, it's a bit over the top. Anyway, you get the point. They've said, this is what my source said. They said, we protected the most vulnerable. We put in support for people. And you are beginning to see the fruits of difference that these difficult decisions are making. We've taken these decisions, but now what you're seeing is we are seeing the living wage go up. We are investing more in public services. We're injecting with cash. Waiting lists are coming down. And these are about the hard decisions the government have made. And these are the fruits of that. And we are sticking with the plan. So that is the kind of view from government. And I think that, in a way, Starmer has a massive majority. And he's like, just shut up. Look, Harriet, I don't disagree with you at all. There is a lot of noise about discomfort over welfare cuts, discomfort over winter fuel allowance. If the government did move, say, onto child benefit cap, that would give MPs something on the doorstep. So if people moan at them about those things, they'll say, yeah, but look, we're dealing with child poverty. And sometimes it's just also giving people something that they can... have some cover or feel like look, ultimately this is also about Labour MPs feeling like their government's doing the right thing.
So I've got my 6.
Give us your list.
What you read out that what Number 10 had been briefing you, and that I think there's 6 things that lie behind that, and that's why, because I ended up with more things on the they won't change side than on they will change side. Is that why they are unlikely to change is if they would change on the winter fuel allowance, it's undermining of the Chancellor. So it would be like just doing it because they couldn't stand the pressure, and that would have its own permutations. On the pro-change side, it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen in Scotland and Wales? Oh my goodness me, party members are really fed up with it. It would show we were listening and prepared to change. They could do something like tax it at 20% or 40% for those on the higher income. But I just think that it feels like, which is what I said at the outset, that it's caused a lot of problems. It's going to continue to cause some problems, especially next year. But it just feels like they better get on and do another kind of retail offer. Okay. The sad thing is that because it stood out alone, they didn't manage to match it with the big increase that pensioners got from the triple lock. If they'd have matched it, it could have been like, hey, pensioners, you're getting a really big deal here. Okay, we're taking away the winter fuel allowance from the majority of pensioners, but actually all pensioners getting this. But because it was out of time, that wasn't possible. It was out of sync. So I think most people are in the we shouldn't be starting from here camp. But bearing in mind we are starting from here, the question is the government going to change it or not? And are they going to look for something else to do? And how do they actually knit everybody together and stay friends with Jo White, even though she's no doubt really irritating them?
The way they stay friends with Jo White is they do something to child benefit cap. So I've got my homework now, and that's what I'm going to start.
I would say not on PIP. I think that PIP is less unpopular on the doorstep because there is a lot of people who you always see in polls, which I always think people are being very mean when they answer these questions in polls, which is, people should be working, and a sort of, there's quite a lot of social conservatism around on that issue. It's not at all the same as the winter fuel allowance.
Well, we can have a bigger debate on that, but I will say this. When you're doing your homework on it, I think we should all employ this lovely grid system that Harriet's got on here.
I know that's actually just in terms of working, a pro and con list. Yeah. I mean, I should do that for every decision I take in my life.
Do you do that for every decision you take in your life?
Well, no, but I do it for the government of which I'm not part.
Teach us.
I love it. Well, look, we're going to run out of time and get kicked out of the studio. And also I've got to put my eye drops in. So we've had a question come in about government messaging, which is very on point, isn't it? So let's have this question from Joe. Oh, I'm reading it. Joe, did you not voice note us? Do it next time, Joe. I'm going to read it. Hey, Queens. Love that.
Yes.
Let's just pause there. Okay. Hey, Queens, I want to ask you about how you guys think Labour can make their policies and changes they've made so far be more digestible to understand to the public. Sometimes I think the main party politicians get so caught up in their own messaging and political jargon, it becomes a bit convoluted to the average person who just wants to know what they're changing and how it will affect them. Now, as a comms expert supremo. Do you want to answer Joe, Salma?
So I would agree with Joe that and I go back to that point where politicians are always a bit too clever by half, and they sort of pontificate and they talk in policy terms. And this has been really at front of mind for me, because I was talking to some friends of mine and I had to explain to them what a tariff was.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, everybody, every news outlet, we just go on and on and on. This is why tariffs are bad, and this is where it's going to be set, and this is the level. And we assume a level of knowledge with people, but there's no reason anybody should know what a tariff is.
Yeah. So true.
And so I think we have to kind of start understanding what are the basic things that we actually need to communicate as a public service, basically. How are we informing the public of what is happening in the world? And that's down to journalists, but it's also down to the way that the government communicates. And we should also think about what are the methods of doing that. And I know kind of like social media and all that kind of stuff has taken off, but there's never anything that I think is a replacement for there being an interaction of scrutiny from journalists, from people asking questions, from being able to be a bit more accessible and a bit more available, to be able to answer questions and do it in a much more direct way. So lots of politicians are on social media, but they sort of just broadcast at you things that are genuinely quite inane. So I think there has to be a little bit more of direct engagement, and more engagement, I think, with the journalistic class, who, by and large, are actually very good at holding government to account.
I totally agree. But I also think it's about telling the bigger story, because Keir Starmer said after the council elections and the mayoral elections, which was so bad for Labour, we're going to go further and faster. And of course, he needs to remind people further and faster where.
Yes.
Further and faster doing what? Because it's in the government's mind with their missions and their objectives, but everybody else is just getting on with their lives. So further and faster could be a bit of a frightening thing if you don't think that you want to go in that direction because you don't know what the direction is. So I think it's all about this big narrative. What is the vision for the country that we're going further and faster to? Because you can get absorbed in, as Joe says, the micro details. And it's not only the bigger picture, but the communication of the bigger picture, which, is called like the narrative. But I think we are missing the narrative of what sort of country we're going to be. I mean, you always have to do more than that. You can't just describe the country and not have a plan to deliver it.
Is it because he doesn't know? Is it because he hasn't written it? I mean, that's the problem, isn't it?
The vision, you mean?
Has he got anything to tell us?
I'm sure he has, and he needs to.
The thing is, what's interesting, though, is I keep going back to Reeves when she talks about growing the economy, and she used to talk about everyday economics, and now they talk about growing the economy and GDP, and everyone, it's what you said, everyone's like, what's that? But if you think about that quote I tried to if you think about the way I tried to transcribe my own shorthand with middling effect or success, but the point is, when you actually look at the things they're hitting on, it's the living wage going up, public services being more invested in, prices coming down in the supermarkets because of inflation. I think prices have been coming down a bit.
Interest rates coming down now as well.
Interest rates. So there are things that you can try to point to say, people's wages are going up or your lives will improve.
Let's go back to Rachel Reeves' everyday economics.
We're talking about corridors of like trains between Oxford and Cambridge, which if you live in that, I mean, Jo does have a point in that, doesn't she? If you're up in the Red Wall and they're talking about Luton Airport and the science corridor, and trade deals with India and the US, that doesn't necessarily mean much to people in Bassetlaw.
Yeah, but hold on. But Jo also talked about the Green Book, which is very specifically about how you measure the VFM, the value for money that you get in government from every pound spent. It's not that you can't have these bigger topics up for discussion because they are relevant. It is actually how do you communicate it? So on one hand, you've got a problem, as Jo rightly points out, it's this microcosm of people who are aware of all the same details that aren't really shared. So it doesn't really make sense. But then you have this other problem, which is you're not really creatively thinking about how you simplify those big concepts so that people really are on the same page. It's not that you should deny people information, it's that you should make it more accessible and you should be able to explain it in a simpler way.
Yeah. Well, I think government telling a story and telling the story better is going to be something that will preoccupy Labour, not least because there is one politician out there looming large, soaring in the polls now, Nigel Reform, Nigel Farage.
Not bad branding for him. Nigel Reform.
He's just Nigel Reform. No, there is one politician out there who is soaring in the polls. And that is Nigel Farage of Reform. And I think everyone can agree that he is a politician that manages to communicate stories in a way that is causing problems for his rivals. So I think political communication and how they do it is something we should come back to, but we can't do any more now because we've run out of time. We're about to get kicked out of the studio. But remember, you can always message us, get us on the burner phone. The number is 07934 200 444. That's 07934 200 444, or email us electoraldysfunction@sky.uk.
And remember, you can follow us anytime, wherever you get your podcasts. If you do, you'll get every new episode right away as soon as it's published.
And thank you, Salma, for coming in and joining us on the podcast, because I was enjoying you on Sky News Paper Review last night or the other night. This week, you're on it this week, weren't you?
Yeah,
I was there. I was like, there she is. Why doesn't she come and hang out with me and Harriet? And now she is.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you be an MP and save the Tory party?
Oh, gosh.
That was the biggest roll I roll of the
need a few more martinis before we get into that conversation.
All right, that's a conversation for martini night. But look, thank you for coming on. It's been an absolute delight to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're off now, so we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.